I had never heard of the Great Replacement Theory until USA Today wrote a story on it. And it's amazing that a congresswoman can impugn somebody's character without even allowing them to answer.
Well, for those of you that don't know, I am an American, and I'm also a proud daughter of a woman who crossed the Southwest border 40 years ago. And I have to tell you that I've been sitting here with a little scorecard of the number of things that I've heard that almost directly say that my mother and asylum seekers are less than human. I've heard a Republican member, talk about immigrants as an infestation, and another one call it an invasion. Mr. Arthur, you and your organization have frequently proposed and defended extreme anti-immigrant policies, such as the Trump administration's so-called zero-tolerance policy, which resulted in thousands of children being taken from their parents at the border, hundreds of whom still have not been reunited. In fact, you called this cruel and inhumane policy, and I quote, absolutely crucial. You also referred to provisions in law meant to protect migrant children as, and I quote, loopholes and quote, flaws, and argued for their elimination. Maybe this kind of awful rhetoric is to be expected from a witness representing an organization founded by an anti-immigrant, racist, white nationalist like John Tanton, but it should have no place before this committee. And then we have Mr. Judd, who has used media appearances to repeat the Great Replacement Theory, tropes regularly pushed by hate groups. This kind of dangerous rhetoric has inspired a rising number of domestic terror incidents across the country in recent years. And all of this for a hearing about a non-existent crisis along a shared border with our friend, our ally, and partner, Canada.
I'd like to yield 1 minute to Mr. Arthur to respond to some of the attacks that were directed his way, if that'd be appropriate.
Thank you, Mr. Strong, and I do appreciate that. One, I disagree with almost everything that the honorable woman said. The Center for Immigration Studies was founded by Otis Graham, who was a professor at the University of California, San Diego. On our board of directors, we have the first Hispanic U.S. attorney from San Diego. We have the former executive director for the Congressional Black Caucus, who was also the former graduate dean at Morgan State University in the home state of Mr. Ivey and I. And we also have the president of the Urban League of Miami. With respect to families and family units and the separation policy, was poorly handled. But in an April 2019 report, a bipartisan panel of the Homeland Security Advisory Committee found that those children are being used as pawns and that they're all traumatized on the trip to the United States. With respect to unaccompanied alien children, I believe the Washington Post editorial board may have used the word loophole to refer to the TVPRA as well. I can't remember if they did, but they certainly alluded to it. But in June of 2014 in Guatemala, President Biden talked about how those kids are being placed in the hands of criminals to be smuggled to the United States who physically and sexually assault them. If you took all of the children who have been released into the United States under the Biden administration, put them all in one school district, it would be the 6th largest in the United States. If you had a school district in which there were a significant number of physical and sexual assaults going on every day, that would be the only thing, God, I pray, that this committee and every committee on Capitol Hill would be looking at every day.
Mr. Judd, how many years have you been an agent?
25, but I'd first like to start. I'm amazed that a member of Congress can actually impugn somebody's character without letting that individual answer the question. She said that I repeated white nationalist tropes, when in reality, all I did was repeated what John D. Podesta said. John D. Podesta's think tank said, demographics, I believe that this is a direct quote, demographics is destiny. I had never heard of the Great Replacement Theory until USA Today wrote a story on it. And it's amazing that a congresswoman can impugn somebody's character without even allowing them to answer. I've been a Border Patrol agent for 25 years.
Well, I'm glad you got to address that. And if you'd like to say anything else on my time, go for it. What else you got?
Sorry about that.
No. How long have you been representing Border Patrol agents in the National Border Patrol Council?
I've been in a position, one or the other, for about 15 years, approximately.
Thank you, sir. Would you say you're proud of your job? And if
I
so,
am.
why?
Very, very proud of my job. I think that it's very important for the safety and security of the American people.
I think you told me a couple years ago, sir, the first time I ever met you, that your organization has endorsed candidates from both parties. Is that correct?
We have.
So would you say that your organization is bipartisan?
It absolutely is.
That's weird because that doesn't happen a lot up in this town. Can you elaborate on why your organization's is bipartisan?
We'll work with anybody that wants to secure the border. That's what we want. We work for the safety and security of the American people. Any law enforcement, when they put on a uniform, what they want to do is they want to protect citizens, and that's what we want to do, and we'll work with anybody that will work with us.
Thank you, sir. Would you agree with Secretary Mayorkas' assessment that we have operational control at the southern border?
Absolutely not.
Can you briefly describe some of the most detrimental policy changes that current administration has put into place?
When you look at the main magnet that draws people to cross our borders illegally is whether or not they're going to be released into the United States. Right now, nearly everybody that crosses the border illegally, if they're not expelled under Title 42, which is only about 30% right now, then they're released into the United States. That's the main magnet that drives people, and he has put that, if you will, he's put that on steroids.
Yeah. Does it bother you on a personal level to see these changes made?
It does, because I know that we can't properly protect the American people with these policies.
Yeah, one of the things that was covered earlier, sir, was the attrition rate in the Border Patrol. In your professional and long-standing position in the Border Patrol, do you think that has anything to do with Border Patrol agents feeling like it doesn't even matter what they do?
It does. I speak with agents on a regular basis that are leaving the agency because they know that they can't do the job that they wanted to do.
That's got to be kind of heartbreaking to somebody who's, devoted so much of your time and life, sacrificed time away from your family to protecting American citizens.
It is.
Yeah. Sir, do you know when President Biden's first visit to the border was? Was it January 23rd?
It was, yes.
Yep. So how many years into his presidency was that, sir?
Just over 2 years.
Do you know how many trips President Trump made to the border, Mr. Judd?
I don't know exactly, but I know that he made multiple trips.
Yeah, we were looking it up this morning. I think it was about 5. Yeah. Do you think it has, as a leader yourself, do you think it has anything to do with leadership if you actually show up to the places that you represent and the people that follow you see you show up?
Yeah, any time that you know that somebody supports what you're doing, what your mission is, you're going to be a lot more energized to do the job.
Awesome. Mr. Arthur, my last question is for you. My colleague over here from Michigan, Mr. Thanader, showed a video of some vehicles going over a bridge in Michigan and then stated that this is hardly a picture of disorder. And I asked a couple other members if they got the same implication that I did, that, hey, it doesn't really, because of the video I'm showing where cars are going over a border and trucks are going over a border, there's no issue here. When you saw that, what did you think about that example that he made in the video that he showed? Do you think that described the border issues that we have going on here in the United States, sir?
Well, actually, the interesting thing is that the conclusion that I drew from that talks about why this hearing today was so important. We need to listen to Dr. Dawson, the ranking member, talked about the importance of trade between the United States and Canada. We need to continue that relationship. Our relationship with Canada is absolutely crucial to our vitality, our economic vitality. I know that the time is up. I'll make it short. We need to make sure that continues. I was in, not this building, but 2 buildings down on September 11th. And everything changed that way, certainly changed. I was oversight counsel for immigration. The dangers that we would have to shut down our economy, shut down our borders, shut down our commerce because something had happened, were real.
Sir, I was asking about a specific video.
I understand that, but
I'm gonna real quick. I'm gonna go to Mr. Judd. Mr. Judd, when you watch that video,
Point of order. Gentleman's time's expired.
okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for allowing me to wave onto this committee. Secretary, good to see you. I want to follow up on a couple of things. Before I get to that, I know you're traveling to China. I hope that will include touting American energy. China has rapidly produced coal plants over the past couple of years. They are concerned about baseload capacity. They are concerned about reality, and yet we have administration officials who are touting the Chinese Communist Party as the leader around the world in combating climate change, which is just incredulous and it's nonsense. So I hope that on your trip there that you'll tout American LNG. If we were to replace the coal plants that China has, we could reduce the CO2 footprint immediately overnight by about 50%. So following up on my colleague here, in your position as special envoy, you made it clear that you do negotiate, on behalf of the president. But let me ask you this: do you have the authority to bind agreements?
No.
Okay, so you're negotiating, and those binding agreements are the
They're
responsibility.
not binding, they don't become a binding agreement unless they're ratified by the Congress, by the Senate. And it's not a treaty, mind you, it's an executive agreement. So it's binding between that administration but not beyond that.
Okay.
It doesn't have the force of law and international law.
In this position, do you advise President Biden on energy policy?
In terms of global challenges and U.S. interest, yes.
Did you advise the president in recent months to travel to Riyadh and to ask OPEC to increase production of oil and gas?
No, I did not.
So Secretary Granholm testified before me on my primary committee in Energy and Commerce, and was a little wiggly on whether or not she was the primary advisor on energy policy for this administration.
Well, she is in regards to writ large, the energy policy. Sure, she is primary.
I'm glad to hear that answer. And I'm trying to figure out who advised the president to go to Riyadh and ask for an increase in production of oil and gas. Let me ask you this. In previous times where we've had the opportunity to have you before this committee, I've asked the question, do the renewable sources of energy like wind and solar, let's just limit it to those, do they have the ability to provide baseload capacity in this country?
Backup baseload, no, but some primary, they could be part of it. Yeah. But can they on their own guarantee that when the wind isn't blowing and the sun ain't shining? No, that we all know.
Well, I think that's good, and I'm glad to hear that, because that's really the fight that we're
But
in.
with battery, there's ways to make that work. Germany is heading to a very high percentage of renewable, others are.
I'm glad you brought up Germany. I'm actually very concerned about the path the German government has taken.
So are we.
Because this repower plan is completely ignoring nuclear, and instead of having Russian natural gas, which does provide baseload capacity, they're moving in a direction that could put them in a very bad spot with regards to baseload capacity. When we look at the administration's desire, specifically of the EPA, to have a mandate for EVs in this country, and there's a couple of different timelines. How much electricity does the United States use on an annual basis right now?
I don't know exactly where we are right now.
Okay.
I don't think
it's 4,000 terawatts. How much additional demand would we need if we got to, let's just call it 50% EV mandate, 287 million cars on the road?
Probably double.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
That's actually what the Secretary of Energy said. I think it's less than that. But here's my point, is that I've questioned the EPA Director, Regan, Secretary Granholm, Mr. Goffman, other high-ranking officials in the administration, and I don't believe anybody has done the math on this. And so there's multiple balls in the air here when we're talking about energy. And I don't think anybody in the administration has actually, I know nobody has done the math on this, because we can't get a straight answer. And so when you go to China and talk to the Chinese about baseload capacity and the power that's required there, I think they're doing the math on it, and they're building coal plants to meet that demand.
Actually, I don't, with all due respect, I know you represent a district that has tremendous wind and the Permian Basin and so forth, and so you have a lot of knowledge of this. But I think there was a recent article showing that it was in fact renewables that kind of helped Texas through the hurdle of this heat because of its reliability and where the energy comes from. But let me just say to you that I think I know the math has been done, and I know that there's a clarity that as the number of electric vehicles go up, as you electrify the country in various ways, you're going to need a lot more power. And that's precisely why the administration is trying to move on the permitting for many of the transmission lines that are essential to being able to get that power out there. So we have about 2,000 gigawatts now of potential power in the queue that is not able to be deployed. So if we can deploy more rapidly, we will fill the void. We will meet the need.
Mr. Chairman, I need 10 seconds. We are going to enter into a crisis in this country if we do not use the resources that are primary sources of energy. I am not an all of the above fan anymore. I am a best of the above fan. And Mr. Secretary, please advocate for the best of the above in this country, which starts with primary sources like liquefied natural gas that come out of the Permian Basin that I represent. And it's critical that we lead in the world, or we will be cold, dark, and
Do you also believe it's critical that they capture the emissions if they're going to make them?
these companies are doing just that. We've reduced emissions, harmful emissions, ones that are listed in the Clean Air Act.
And you believe that can be brought to scale
We have
and
scaled
be
it.
affordable?
We've scaled it in the Permian Basin. We've gone from 1 million barrels a day just 12 or 13 years ago to 5.5 million barrels a day, 43% of the total production in the United States. And in doing that, we have also reduced harmful emissions by over 40%.
Well, it's great. And look, I've had conversations with many of the CEOs of our biggest companies, asking them and trying to get fully knowledgeable about what's doable and what isn't here. The key is, folks, we've got to meet the target of the reduction of emissions that we know will help us avoid the consequences of what's happening. That's the key. And I'm not picking which way it's going to happen. I want to see it happen, and we'll go from there.
Let's use the best of the above. Mr. Chairman, thank you for letting me wave on. I yield back.